Hey friends, I'm Daniel Nesbitt, and we are back designing a serif font in glyphs-mini. And in the last episode, we did quite a bit of catching up on the uppercase, and in this episode, I'm probably going to jump around a little bit. It looks like we're kind of getting down to some of the characters now that match up somewhat well. Letters like the S, the V, W, X, Y, Z, things like that. We do have some like with the K as well. It's like a lot of the angled stuff really is what I'm getting at that we pretty much have left on this before we start jumping into things like numbers and punctuation. So to kick things off, I figured the best way to get going with this is just to stick with something that has a little bit of familiarity to some of the other letters that we've already done, and that would be the M, the lowercase m. So for this one, I'm going to pretty much just set up the M like the N here. Now, one thing that I'm going to keep in mind is if I were to keep it this width, and actually let's really get this all the way here. So I'm actually going to make this, I think that should do it. So it's the exact same space between each of these pieces here. And basically, if I were to go with this, if I jump back to this here, you'll notice that that looks pretty wide. And this is an issue that we're going to run into with the W as well. So I'd really like to get something solved in the M here, so that by the time we get to the W, we kind of have a better idea of how wide we can push this before it starts getting a little too unwieldy. So rather than just making it what you would think with an M or basically the two parts of the N, I'm going to grab all of this and I'm just going to bump things in by 5 units here. Make sure that I grab all the correct pieces. So if I do something like that, I think that gets a little bit better. And I'm going to use might and night just to kind of determine my progress here. So you can see that it definitely buttons things up a little bit, I guess, for lack of better words. And I'm just going to check my widths here, because it looks like I could probably actually bring everything over even a little bit more on the first spot there. So let's get that taken care of. See where we're at. There we go. And then we'll reset. Oops, my keys are getting ahead of me here today. And that's looking quite a bit better, I think. So it's still, I mean, effectively it's taking the, I guess I didn't even plan this, but the width of the N and the I there actually seem to work really well to make it, it's almost like a monospace in a way, which is kind of wild. But I like it, and I think I'm going to roll with that. So we're going to check the M off the list. I think that's looking pretty good. Now jumping up to the uppercase M, I'm going to go and grab the N, and again, we'll use that as kind of the starting point. We'll use our cap H for the spacing here. Now, the thing to keep in mind is we've got 2 upstrokes here with the N, and then we've got this angled piece here, and that's going to be changing a little bit because we don't have an upstroke to finish this off, we have a downstroke. Now, the one thing that I've got to keep in mind, because it seems to be a running thing that I never remember, but it looks like whether I'm going up or down, I'm keeping the same width for the vertical metrics here, so totally fine. And probably the easiest way to do this is just to copy this piece then. We'll move it over, give it a little flip, and then we basically just, it leaves us to determine what it's going to look like here for this piece. Now before I resolve widths and everything else as far as the stroke widths here go and then how that meets at the bottom there, what I'm going to do for a moment is actually, I'm going to get my metrics updated there. And then similar to what we did before, we're going to do night and might. It's probably not going to line up exactly like it did last time, and I don't think it needs to. But I'm just going to work out the overall width of this M here. And I'm thinking something maybe like that. Let me get my spacing there as well, it might help. So yeah, kind of what I'm thinking here is that width is probably going to work. I think we might determine if I'm on the right path or not when I start pushing some of these around here to get the point at the bottom. And basically what I'm going to do here, again, we're not going to worry about the stroke widths yet. I'm just kind of working out placement. But we'll get those two to meet up there. And so it looks like I've got a little extra space on the left side here. So bump that over, and then looks like it was a difference of 5, and there's no real good way to divide that, so I'm just going to pick a side and go with it. So when I see this, that looks pretty open at the top, and I'm not a huge fan of that, honestly. So what I'm going to do is we're going to try and move the top in a little bit. So that's going to thicken that up a little bit more. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is, I think so there's kind of a lot of weight going on where it connects here, and I think this is kind of an opportunity we can use to just thin this up a little bit more. And so I'm just looking between this this point and this point here just to kind of determine how much I can get away with. But we're going to go with that, and then I'm going to add a couple points on each of these. And let's see, I'm going to actually just move these points in rather than delete them. And then from there, we can take these two, move them down a little bit, just to give it kind of the illusion that they're of the same thickness. I'm actually going to bump these out a little bit more. So it's going to be kind of tapering in a little bit, and that's actually probably too much. May end up going right back to where I started. Maybe try something like that there. Because the other thing that I'm looking at too is this stroke here actually should be a little bit thicker. So, you know, technically if I was doing this right, it would go thin, thick, thin, thick. But we don't really have much contrast in this typeface, so we're going to roll with it a little bit here. And I'm just kind of using this, or just kind of going visually here just to figure out how to make this look right. So it's not too bad. I mean, one thing, I usually don't do this, but at the beginning of the series, I said, you know, a good portion of this may just be me trying different things and doing things that I wouldn't normally do. So let's try something I don't normally do and move that up a little bit. And maybe that actually helps it out more than I was expecting. I think that actually looks pretty good. So just moving that center point up off the baseline, it kind of opens it up. It still comes across to me as an M, which is wonderful. That's exactly what we were aiming for. And it seems to kind of go well with all the widths and everything. It is a little bit wider than the H or the N, but that's the goal. It's a wider letter, so I'd say we're looking pretty good on that one. The only thing I may jump back and do, though, now that I went and did this, is I may thin up these two lines a little bit more just to help it out a little bit. So let's do that real quick. And I'm just looking the M here kind of next to the L, M, N, O. I'm just keeping an eye on those, and that's more or less what I'm going off here to determine how I want that to shape up. The next letter I'm going to tackle here is going to be the J. And what I was kind of hoping from the get-go is that I would just be able to pull something like this off and that it would work. So we're going to find out if this is going to be the case or not. So as far as the cap, we definitely don't need the dot on the J. But we'll line it up there. And then for the O, I believe we just were doing an overshoot of 20 points. So I'm just going to line those up like that. And I might have been off on this. It was 30. All good. We got to figure it out. But what I'm hoping is that I can kind of get away with this a little bit. So my concern, I don't really want to make it too wide because I don't want a pronounced empty space to the upper right and left there. I may just pull the spur out a little bit there. So it's going to be a little bit more than things like the N. But take a look. The J is easily one of those tricky characters that, it just gives you fits. And I wish I could tell you I have a better way of doing a J, but I'm not sure that I do. The other thing that I'm going to do too, and I'm just kind of visually winging this here, but I'm going to see what happens if I just widen it up just a tad. And then for now, just for the sake of putting side bearings, we'll do the H. So just widening it up a little bit, I think, kind of helped it some. Yeah, it's difficult, but I think that's okay. So one of the other letters that, actually another couple letters that I wanted to take a look at was the lowercase r. And for this one, we're going to kind of do the obvious here, which was to grab the N, and then also do the obvious of getting rid of those points there. But I don't want to stop here because it just looks a little bit strange. I want to make this so that it kind of works a little bit better. Actually, I might even use the O for that. I think that might be better spacing for now. Let's just make it a proper word too while we're at it. Because I don't want to have like a ton of extra space just hanging out down here. So a couple things that you'll typically see type designers do is first things first, drop the connection point down a little bit here, and then actually make the R a little bit narrower. And those two things should get us more in the ballpark of where we want to be. And then we'll just go through. I'm not exactly sure why my metrics aren't updating here, but there we go. Sometimes my keyboard shortcuts get a little cranky. Actually, while I'm looking at this, it does seem pretty close to the lowercase t width. At least it kind of has that visual vibe to it. I think that looks all right. So it's kind of an easy solution. The one thing that I might do, though, just to have a little fun here, is I'm going to grab the end of that J, and for the sake of just kind of keeping some consistency and things of that nature going on, we're going to see what happens if we just kind of mimic how that J, or actually, back up one step further. As we were talking about the T, and maybe you were shouting in your computer screen, and if you were, I apologize. But maybe let's take a look at this. Maybe this might work a little bit better. So it's not going to be kind of an exact match or anything like that, and that's fine. But effectively what I'm trying to do here is just kind of keep a similar idea or a similar feel to how that ends. So maybe let's try something like that. Get rid of that. Get our side bearing set there. So that does look a little on the wide side, and because I can just kind of keep narrowing this up, and I don't mind doing that, I think I kind of like that a little bit better. And then just grab this, bring it down a little bit more, thicken up our line there a little bit, just so that it kind of feels the same as this one. We are kind of getting away a bit from our angles here, but I think that's going to be okay. Just bring this J back a little bit here. Because I don't know. It's possible I could maybe mimic that just a little bit more. Just to kind of thicken up my points there a little bit. So I think that might actually help a little bit. And then maybe just take this, bring it back up a little bit more, and there we go. It's all right. And then one last thing I'm just going to take care of here. So at least this way it kind of mimics the J a little bit. It's kind of upside down. It's got a little bit of the T going on as well, even though the T has an opposite stroke width order thing going on there. But I think something like that might work. It seems to fit in somewhat well. Arguably, I probably could drop the connection point down here just a little bit more. But we'll see how that goes. So, and who knows, I may end up revisiting that one a little bit later. I'm not exactly sure if I'm a huge fan of that lowercase r, but yeah, it's sometimes you just gotta roll with it, right? So the last one that I was going to focus on for today's episode was the A. And the reason that I wanted to do this was at this point then everything that is left has a common letter in the upper and lower cases. Now for the A, make sure I grab all my pieces here, because what I'm looking at is just kind of using some of these elements of the M that we got started with, and then seeing how I might be able to flip this into an A. And eventually, this will probably be more of the basis for where we end up with the V, for example, and then ultimately the W and the rest of those angled letters, even Even letters like the K could benefit from stuff like this too. So to start, it's mostly just going to be focused on kind of getting a width going on here. And I'm just going to use the word March. It's the first one that came to mind. Just to figure out where I'm at for width. I don't think I'm too far off. So maybe we'll get something like that. And again, I'm not really paying super close attention to the A quite yet. Actually, one thing I'm going to try, because I did actually have this idea, and this actually does mess up everything I just said, but who knows, maybe this even turns into an alternate. I guess we'll find out. I'm just going to drag that piece down for a moment, and let's do a flippy flip here. Sometimes you just gotta try stuff and see if it works before you move on. Not bad, but I don't know that that's gonna work now that I see it. It is kind of a finicky character, and that's fine. But who knows, maybe later on we'll take a look at making that an alternate. But I think for now, I actually just like having the V-shape A going on here instead. So, get that taken care of. I'm going to grab the crossbar from the H, and this is going to probably sit pretty low. That's fine. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab the serif on the top of the M there, just to give this a little bit of something up here. Probably doesn't need to be that much. That's fine. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is reverse this, because as we noted earlier on the M, it was thick than thin, and then in this case, because we're going up, we want thin than thick. And even just flipping that, I promise I didn't change the weight or anything, but it almost looks like a brand new character just by doing something like that. The other thing that I'm going to do is just kind of tune the feet here a little bit so they look fairly even. Just kind of grab that, and there we go. So it's a semi-decent A, and it probably still has a bit of work to go. One thing I could try, just for the sake of trying things, because I'm all about that today, is what would happen if we maybe did something funky. So let's take out our knife tool. We'll give it a chop there and there. Maybe that does something fun. I mean, this is a display type, so I'm kind of taking a little bit more liberty than I normally would with something, and who knows, maybe that ends up being too much of a visual there, but for now, I think we'll leave that and just kind of let that be. So, I think that we're going to call it a wrap on this episode, and what's really cool now is that pretty much everything that's left, actually everything that's left, lines up its upper and lowercase variants, so we can start looking at how some of these letters, like the V, W, X, the Z, the K, the S, I guess kind of the Y too, how they'll more or less be working off of their upper or lowercase counterpart. And so in the next episode, we'll start tackling some of those letters. So as always, thanks for watching. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you're enjoying this series. And one other announcement that I want to make real quick that I'll have up on the screen here is earlier this month, I started my new newsletter. For many years, many of you have probably seen on my website, I had a weekly Finally Friday newsletter, but I just determined that it was time for a change. So I want to introduce letter form to you. And letter form is going to be a little bit different than my past newsletter series in that it's actually going to be focusing a little bit more on some of the small detail-oriented things about a letter design. Not necessarily type design, but almost everything will relate to type design in a way. But if you're looking for those little tips and tricks that just kind of carry on with the lettering process or the type design process, I think you'll find that really useful and really exciting. Not to mention, periodically I will throw in updates as far as new series or new videos that come along on my YouTube channel as well. So it's just a great way to keep up with a lot of the content that I have coming out right now, and actually I am planning for in the future as well. So I'll drop a link to Letterform in the description below if you want to check out more of what Letterform is. You can actually even see past issues online as well if you want to get an idea of what you're subscribing to before you hit that subscribe button. But either way, as always, I appreciate everyone who tunes in and watches these. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or things that you're seeing in these, by all means, make sure to hit that comment section below and share your thoughts. Let me know how this is progressing or if there's anything that you would maybe like to see me tackle in this project. So as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next episode.